Good afternoon and welcome back. Again, we are talking about fractals, and our final group is going to be discussing fractals within art and history.
Hello, my name is Elliot Hansen. These are my coworkers here. We have Nasir, we have Monica, Tyler, and Denisa. So today we're going to be talking about fractals in art and history. But first, what is a fractal? A fractal essentially is a pattern or a geometrical shape that just repeats over and over again, and if you zoom in, it looks essentially the same. To my left, you should see a Mandelbrot set. To my right, you should see a Stuart triangle. These are very common. Sets that you tend to see. These repeats over and over again, and you see this a lot of times used in math and nature, talking about nature. Fibonacci sequence. Now, the Fibonacci sequence is a repeatable pattern. It follows the golden ratio. It is like 1.6, or 1.6.18. This pattern repeats on one of the things you tend to see, like on like things like seashells or like the galaxy in the Milky Way. But it goes a little bit more than that. It can be used for a composition. Things for like paintings, and you can see this iteration in things like music. In fact, Denisa, how is Fibonacci sequence used in art?
Some of the things that we can find the Fibonacci sequence in is music. The Fibonacci sequence lets us interpret and read music in a different way. When the Fibonacci sequence increases in size, we have the rectangle become more clear and more close together, which makes the golden proportion, golden ratio, and the way that some composers used the golden ratio was by dividing up the bars inside their sonatas. So a sonata has like two parts. One part is the exposition, which is the introduction to the theme, and the other one is the development and recapitulation, which is the development and repetition of your theme. And the way they did that is by dividing your development and interpretation by your exposition, and that's how you get your perfect golden ratio. And then in paintings, we have Leonardo da Vinci, which he's really famous for using all the Fibonacci sequence in all his paintings, and some of his mostly known work was also the Last Supper. I wanted to move on to the Japanese painter because back in the 1820s, he started talking about fractals. I mean, he didn't even know what fractals were, but he still drew them off of the great wave of Kanagawa, and it wasn't until 1975 that fractals were introduced in history. So I thought that was pretty cool of him. You can see that if you keep zooming in, you'll keep getting the same fractal and just become more and more clear. But the art is not just about paintings and music. We can also see them in artifacts. In Ethiopia, they have a whole different fractal, which is quite different from the wave. It's more of a crisscross kind of pattern. But enough about artifacts, because I'm actually not that well educated about them. So I wanted to move on to the most one you probably have seen, which is Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. And you can already see the spiral pattern, but I thought we should get a closer look of each brush stroke inside the painting, which is already a fractal within itself. I just wanted to show you a quick example without actually going into the video for too long. But something I recently heard about is the movie Love and Vincent, and I wasn't sure how fractals were incorporated into the movie. And I thought Monsieur could tell me more about that.
I actually can. So this is the best part about fractals. We've always wondered, how do fractals work in films? How do they make the landscape look so realistic? How do they make the mountains look so realistic? Fire, water, everything. Let's talk about paintings and films. We're going to dive into this little film. It's a movie based on a painting. So everything that you see is a painting, and everything that you see is a fractal. As you can see in all of these paintings right here, these are fractals being used to incorporate into this film. Let me take a step back and ask, what are fractals? I found out that fractals are actually a curve of figures where each part has the same statistical character as the whole. Simply putting it, each part is the same as a whole, and that's what fractals are. Moving on from this film, we're going to move to Doctor Strange. Have you guys watched Doctor Strange? Alright, the landscape. Look at this landscape right here. How did they make this landscape in films? They never had the technology to make landscapes like this back in the days. But what they did have was fractals. And over time, they found a way to correspond fractals with filming. And you can see in the landscape, each part is a fractal itself, where each part is the statistical same as the character in a whole. Moving on. We're going to move on to Tron Legacy. I'm going to play a certain portion of the film where you guys are going to see mass production of fractals being used. And just go back a little bit to the 209. In the film, the landscape and everywhere you can see fractals are being used. In the back where the holograms are, right there. Could you go back a little bit? This is the part where fractals are used the most in the Tron Legacy. Right there, when you see the body get cut in half, each part is the statistical character of the whole. So each little bits of those pieces made up the whole person in itself, which is how they incorporate fractals in films. And to cover more on fractals, let's look at Black Panther. How are fractals being used in these two pictures? Well, it's the clothing. And where does the clothing come from? The clothing comes from the culture. Fractals are being used in each one of these little parts right here, in the clothing that this lady is wearing. And the same goes for this one. But I don't really know much about fractals in culture, which is why I'm going to have Monica help me out. Could you explain a little bit on fractals within cultures?
Yes, I can.
All right.
Alrighty, let's look at a few examples. Okay, perfect. In textile. Okay, so this is a Fulani wedding blanket from Mali. So the weaver, he was actually reported weaving in energy, spiritual energy, and each textile is just an increase of energy. And if he were to stop weaving in the middle, that would mean he's releasing the energy, which is a sign of death. So the couple has to keep the weaver awake by bringing him food, water, and just anything he needs so that he can complete that blanket. And then let's go through another one. This is an unintentional fractal. When they asked what the meaning of these, the weavers just said they were just using their sense of beauty and intuition. And then this is inspired by nature, snakeskin. Okay, now I want to go into a certain pattern you're going to see in a lot of cultures called the flower of life. This is the composition of it. Alright? Okay. So the flower of life has like a lot of meaning and secrets of the world, and I couldn't really find the exact secrets, but there are like a lot of patterns in the flower of life. So this is the seed of life. There's 7 circles, right? And in some some faiths, it means the 7 days it took God to create life. This is the tree of life, which is important in Judaism. The fruit of life, from what I researched, it contains the blueprints of atoms and molecules, just the blueprint of making life. And then this is Metatron's cube. And if you took the fruit of life and you connected it, that's what you get here. And in some faiths, it means it's warding off evil. And then here's some examples: Forbidden City, Beijing, China, and then in Egypt in a temple. And then again, more examples where you're going to see that. And then fractals are also used in African settlement architecture. So this is where the chief lives. This is his immediate family, and then this is the village. And then this is the elders within the village, and it just keeps branching off as they create more families. And then within the chiefs, there's a small box where people live, where it continues. Can anyone give me an idea of what group of people can live in this small box? Even my teammates, can you think of a group? No? It's spirits, their ancestors, and it just keeps going in over and over. And then here's another example, and it's circular this time. So as you keep going towards the center, you have to be more respectful, because this is the sacred temple where marriages and sacrifices are. And in these cultures, infinity is an important concept because life is never ending. It may end physically, but they believe in afterlife. And then this is an example where it benefits their agriculture. It's not because of kinship, politics, or defense. It just benefits the fruit and crops growing around them. And then this is the streets of Cairo, and you can see it just keeps going on and on. Now, I've talked a lot about African settlement architecture, and I want to ask Tyler, is there anywhere else in the world where we can see fractals being used in architecture?
There are, and let me tell you some more about some examples of fractals in architecture. So, the first example I have is in French Gothic architecture, and in the floor plan layout of if you're looking down at it when they're building it, this shows repetition and symmetry as and it gets bigger and bigger of the same small squares, and then you can start getting into the religious meanings behind it, because when cathedrals are built, they're trying to emulate that cross Jesus type shape. And as well as when you see it like this, there's a lot of examples of fractals within the building itself. For example, this is a cathedral in Orleans, France. It's the Saint Croix. And you can see examples of fractals in a couple different ways. For example, it shows a thing in fractal geometry called Cantor sets, which is when you take a line, you split it into thirds, and then you take out the middle, and then you expand it again, split it into thirds, take out the middle, and you can see that here. So if you were to look at this line, you take out the middle, and then you keep the two sides, and then you go again. And on these two very tip pillars here, you split it to thirds, and you take out the middle. So that's, and a lot of different Gothic cathedrals are built in this way, as well as in the artwork. So here's an example of the stained glass in the Notre Dame Cathedral, and this shows fractals in its symmetry and its repetition. So you can see that as it goes in, it kind of repeats itself and gets smaller and smaller. The next I have is this Hindu temple, and this shows the concept of Koch's curve, in that the Koch's curve is when you have a triangle, and then it repeats itself and adds triangles around it, so it's just a bunch of smaller triangles around it. And as you can see in this breakdown of what this major temple looks like, there's like one tower, and then the tower is surrounded by more towers, and then so on and so forth. And they get smaller and smaller and smaller as you go along. And within the Hindu beliefs, when they're building it, they have certain criteria they have to meet for like the different chambers, so that in general, they're trying to bring in self-realization and always trying to get to the divine truth, and that's kind of why they build it in this way. And the last example I have is the Eiffel Tower in France, and this was completed during the 19th century when fractals were becoming more for the use of function, and people were seeing art as more modernism and more functionality, and this shows that in that you can see the fractals with all the like smaller versions of like the beams and the triangles here, and it was the designer of the tower was trying to make it so it was more functional, and that it was the material was lighter and you used less of it to make it, and so that shows how fractals are used to like improve the functionality of like making architecture. And you can just see all the different fractals here, and then the upward view of the Eiffel Tower there. And so, as you can see, we've shown many different ways that in architecture and art and history that fractals are used. Do we have any questions?